Welcome to another episode of Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. I am your co-host, Jonathan Burke, here with Jason Roba. Today, we are going to discuss the OT levels. Probably should have made some posts and stuff like that for people to ask questions or something, but we just came up with this subject for this podcast on the fly. So I'm going to start this out with, and this is going to seem odd, Jason, but it's going to seem cryptic. I'm going to start this out with something Ellerate says on the Class 9 course, which is Neurodynamics for OTs. It's one of my favorite phrases. And that phrase is, the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. Now, what does that have to do with the OT levels? Well, it has a lot to do with the OT levels, because if you're a being walking around with all of this charge on your case, and like LRH says, he says, one day the guy's limbosis is gone and he doesn't even realize it. That's what the OT levels are like, is that, and you can confirm this as well. I mean, it is, being on OT too, that it's just gone.
Right.
And you can't quite put your finger on what's gone, but it's gone. And you realize that you feel different. And this is why I'm bringing this up now at the beginning of the podcast is, people say, well, what are the, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Before I did the OT levels and stuff like that, I always kind of had this hidden standard that I was going to end up being Gandalf the Gray or Gandalf the White.
Right.
Sort of a thing. And, to certain degrees, you are, because like when he's there on the bridge with the Balrog, and he says, "You shall not pass." What's that? Tone 40.
Yeah.
Tone 40. And, that's one of the things that improves when you get this charge off of your case, is the amount of intention that you regain. And that's the funny thing about the OT levels is people, when they haven't done them, they're comparing themselves, and they're comparing what the OT levels are about. They're looking at it as money. They're looking at it as raw power. They're looking at it as things, and this podcast originally was going to be about Be Do Have. And then I said, well, we've done 2 podcasts on it. So, but that's Be Do Have and the OT levels. They have a lot to do with each other, but beingness is the primary thing. And that's the important thing about the OT levels, is you're not dealing in concepts of the physical universe. You're dealing in concepts of the theta universe that we are all a part of. And that is where the OT levels come in.
Right.
Getting that theta back, so to speak. And it's not something you can point out to a person and say, theta. Well, if you were like in I don't know. I always think, for some reason, I always think of theta as a bunch of hot air balloons in New Mexico. I don't know. I don't know why, when they have the big hot air balloon event there every year and everything like that. And there's thousands of these hot air balloons in the sky and stuff. It's just, it's a field of poppies, a field of different colored, what do they have in Holland? The tulips and stuff that.
Yeah.
It's a spider web with dew on it. Anything aesthetic, has a quality of theta to it, even though it's a physical universe object. But real theta, because those types of things are the closest you can get and say there.
Right.
That's what theta is like.
I would say you can see it too with people. Like when you see someone on stage playing an amazing guitar solo, and they're flowing, so to speak, when it's like there's that pure theta coming through someone, like there's that tension, and that guitar solo or that awesome tenor sax solo at the jazz club coming through, and you can just see very theta people out there. And there, I would say too, I mean, Hubbard talked about there are operating thetans, and then he talked about there are people who are, there's people who are born naturally with OT ability, operating thetan ability, but they aren't kind of cleared OTs. They might have some of this incredible ability, but it's still buried under a lot of other stuff. There's all that charge there, and you might have the person who can play the amazing guitar solo or the amazing tenor sax solo that one night, but they still have a lot of other things in the way that keeps them from being able to be in that native state of OT outside of playing that tenor sax solo. They might get it out then.
Yeah. And that's one of the things about the OT levels is communication, is really improved in the way that I don't want to, when I say communication, I don't necessarily mean the way that you're talking. That could be, but it's just like you were saying, it's a communication of musical notes. It's a communication of intention. There's intention is something that is not necessarily solid. It is something that is theta. One of the examples, like what you're talking about, I used to work at the Font School of Music, Jamie Font's music school, which is basically the Scientology bridge, but in music. And he had Jamie had a plaque on his wall that came from LRH, and LRH said, "This is the bridge for music." And and it was in LRH's handwriting. And I was just like, yep, I would agree. And one day when I was working there, I went over to Jamie's house to deliver something from the school. And I don't know how else to describe it. Again, multicolor, rainbow, tulip, poppy, this thing was flowing out the windows and out the door. And Jamie was by trade a bass player. He used to play with Chick Corea and the Flying Burrito Brothers and stuff in the 70s. And he was playing piano. And Jamie was OT5. There are other situations I've seen musicians that were different, but this particular communication in the way that he was playing the piano, it was his own piece. It wasn't necessarily classical. It seemed a little bit, but not so much. But the intention and just the theta that was coming out that door from him playing piano, I have never, ever in my life, and believe me, being a drummer, I've listened to tens of thousands of hours of music. I have never, ever experienced any kind of communication that was so much there. And it was as it was
that I wrote for us.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm kidding.
It was one of those things where you didn't anticipate it, and it just struck you. It wasn't a slap. It was and your podcast music is great. I'll be honest with you, Jason. Most of the time when I listen to the beginning of one of these podcasts and your music comes on, I get a tear in my eye. I do.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't then with Jamie's music because it was just so unexpected, but it was coming from an OT. And I got the opportunity to tell him this when I started taking lessons again back in 2011 or 2012.
Yeah.
I got to tell him how profound him playing the piano was to me and everything. And I mean, his knowledge in music and everything was just stunning. He's passed away. He's been gone, from that iteration, probably now for 8-10 years. But that's the thing with OT levels, is that you get this ability to exude, purvey, emanate things that you always wanted to, and you didn't know that you could. All of a sudden, you just have that ability to do that because you don't have this charge in the way anymore. And I don't want to sound all uh, Bible thumperish or anything like that, but how the hell LRH figured this stuff out
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, it is just a marvel to me that what he had to do in order to make this stuff happen, especially, OT2 and OT3, because they're a little bit more, I don't know, they're just a little bit more cryptic. There's no backstory to it. There's no behind the scenes. This is how I came up with it,
Right.
or whatever. But when you go in session, you do what you do what he says to do, and everything reads just like he says it will. And you might even be dubious and go, "Oh, come on," but it's the truth. And that's the neat thing about the OT levels is you're just peeling the onion, going deeper and deeper and deeper into something that is not tangible. The hardest thing to spot is a missingness again, is it's not something you can see with your body.
Yeah. Just like you said about Hubbard with where did this come from, like with OT2, OT3. And it's like the same thing when you listen to Wagner, like where the fuck did that come from? Like listen to Entry of the Gods into Valhalla. And it's like there other people who've gone to school for music can listen to it and appreciate it for the complexity of the harmony and textures.
Yeah.
But if you listen to it purely as aesthetics, it's centuries beyond anything else from that era. It's aeons beyond anything you've ever heard before.
Yeah.
The way that he works with texture and timbre. And I'm just using that one as example because it's what I heard my mind and my mind's ear, so to speak, when you're talking about OT2 and OT3. It's like where did Wagner come up with that? And it's the same thing. You can find composers, we can find OTs that have this ability to bring something, to take a Terence McKenna term, transcendental, to find something transcendental.
And yeah, it and that's the thing. The OT levels are very transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their own particular abilities and things like that. And I will step outside the framework of the OT levels, and you can see these OT abilities like with somebody like Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to people that saw him live. I mean, I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they'd see him on stage, and they would say there was just this presence about him, and they'd never seen anything like it in their lives. I mean, these people, it's a term, OT levels and stuff like that, but it's beingness and its intention and it's the ability to communicate and include a person in your space. And that was something that Elvis did really, really, really well. It was one of those, you've heard that thing, it was like he was talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even the interesting thing I'd say with Elvis too, and something being transcendent, he was very much also into the esoteric side of martial arts. He was a red belt in karate, which a red belt, if anybody studies the Japanese martial arts, is beyond black belt, and it has to do with ki energy or chi energy. Master of, if you just want to say, a red belt is like a theta belt, working with theta, working with energy. And people say, oh, he's just flipping his hands around and doing hand gestures on stage. But if you watch some of like his final performance, he's doing one of those. I think they're called mudras at the very end of the show with his hands, and it's like, oh yeah, he's using some of those red belt karate techniques.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a bunch of bullshito out there in the martial arts world where people are being charlatans, but there are legitimate red belts out there who can light newspaper on fire in their hands with just their theta energy, their chi energy, their life force energy being directed into creating heat in the middle of a piece of paper without having put a burning ember in it, 10 seconds ago before the camera turned on.
Right.
There are people out there who can do that.
Yeah.
There are people who can walk across coals without burning the flesh on the bottom of their feet. And you could talk about, there have always been OTs. There hasn't been, an ability though until Ron came around to stabilize that state. Before the podcast, we were talking about clears and theta clears and mest clears and Taco Bell clears and all the variations of clear. And it's like, I would say that everything that Ron did was to create the stable state of OT. He may have called it clear back in the Excalibur era, back in the 1930s into the 40s when he was putting his initial manuscript together. But I think, as things developed, we went beyond the state of clear into having the state of OT, that was the OT levels began to be developed really thoroughly there through the 1960s. So, people can listen to the Philadelphia doctorate course lectures and listen to him talking about theta clearing, and you can read 88008 and talk about theta clearing. And it's like this whole time, he's been developing a technology to create OTs, to create stable OTs. And he talks about it. I forgot which one it's in, but he said one of his lectures, I want to say it's in the New Era Dynetics lectures, I want to say, where he talks about having a clear OT is what we're doing on the OT levels. Because anybody can, remote view someone if you really want to. Mothers are great about this. They can know when their child is in danger. They just know. Lovers can do this, friends can do this. We can check in on each other and make sure, you can put a beam of energy onto someone and see what's going on. And some people have more ability with this than others. So that's an OT ability there. In the occult and in other esoteric areas, people would call them cities, not CITYS, but SIDDIH. I think is the American way of writing, or the English way of writing it. But these phenomena that occur. And, Crowley would talk about, don't get distracted by all the cities. You don't get distracted by all the bullshit. Stay on your path. Crowley gets a lot of bad PR, but he was one about, don't fuck around. You gotta you gotta stay on your path in life and don't get distracted by all the fucking pretty rocks. You'll find some ability. Don't dick around with it. So it's the same thing with OT abilities. People have some of these things and they find this ability to play their amazing tenor sax solo or something, or their amazing guitar solo or paint or sculpt or whatever it is. However, when they're no longer keyed out and doing that, the mass that they're keyed out from comes back in on them and crashes them, and they fall into addictions and bad marriage stuff and sex stuff and crime and they're OT for the 15 minutes that they play that tenor sax solo, but after that, they're close to death or below death on the tone scale, and they're OT for 15 minutes. So the OT levels, in my opinion, are there to create a stable operating theta, to create someone who still has the Homo sapien body that they're taking care of, but that Homo sapien body kind of becomes their favorite pet at that point, and not something they are at effect to. They're at cause over that body for the most part. We still have them. They're still here. We still got to eat. We still got to shit. We still got human bodies. And, and the church, oh my God, OTs, no, we still got these human bodies to take care of. And, but I would say that an OT has more ability to be in that native state of operating thetan more than the natural OT who came out with the ability to play a 15-minute long tenor sax solo, who only does it for a night. We have those abilities more readily available to us to use on a regular basis. And I see that I'm only partway through OT2, and I'm seeing the way that it's changing my existence around me, and I'm seeing the way that I fit into my existence around me differently now. And
it's hard to describe, isn't it?
Yeah, but there it's something like there's also something not there too. I can't describe what's not there anymore. It's not like doing the grades. It's not like being a clear, but there's something that's not there anymore that I didn't feel, doing the lower bridge, where it's like, oh yeah, there's all that charge that just left, and it's like farting and like having that relief. It's not. That's the way I describe, like, a couple of long fall blowdowns is like a good fart that relieves that pressure in your abdomen. And it's like with this, it's like it's like it's a little quieter, it's a little more serene, and that melody that I'm composing can come out of me differently than melodies that came out of me when I was a clear or before I was a clear. For instance, the AOGP podcast theme was written by me as a clear. I hadn't started the OT levels yet. So I'm curious to see. Maybe I'll write us a new version of that, or just a completely different theme upon completion of OT2. I'll write another one upon completion of OT3. Maybe I'll do that. So you guys will know.
Yeah, you'll be the first to know.
Yeah. So anybody who listens to this one, yeah.
And that's the thing is that I noticed when I finished new OT7, and I sat down on the drum kit and I was trying to get my chops back. I noticed that, and you being a drummer and a musician, and I mentioned this to Jamie once too. I said, I struggle with tensing up, and he says we all do, as far as a body. And one of the things that I noticed that very much was the hardest thing to spot as a missingness is there wasn't nearly as much tension in the body, and I could do things with ease that I couldn't do before because I had all these ridges and stuff like that were now dissipated from OT7 and OT5, new OT5. And that's a good analog to how it is in life in general when you have all this stuff dissipated and as is, that the OT levels, it's sort of like walking around with 6 wetsuits on. And you peel off one wetsuit on OT2 and another wetsuit on OT3, and you're like that kid in a Christmas, the brother in A Christmas Story who can't bring his arms in because he's wearing so much warm clothing. And it's the hardest thing to spot as a missingness, is you can't necessarily quantify it beyond just saying that there is a placidity and a lucidity there, that it is just so serene and so calm. And you put your attention on something or someone, and you're not thinking, you're just knowing. You just know. And that it can work against you if you're not careful as well. I don't know if this is true for all other OTs, but I used to watch a lot of Dead Files, which is on gosh, what is it? What channel was it on? They've moved it now. It was one of the cable channels, and they also had Ghost Adventures on there as well. I had to be really careful, and I don't have any other way to explain this. And this is something that I find very interesting. I had to be really careful that I did not put my attention on these places.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean.
that were haunted.
Yeah.
Because it's like rats jumping a ship. And it's like, you see the mooring lines from the big ships and stuff, and you'd see the rats going down the mooring line and up, and then they, there's this transferal, and you have to be careful of what you put your attention on.
Oh yeah.
And and there's another thing, this is that people might find interesting, is once you, I can't say for anybody else, but I can for myself. Once you get to a certain point in solo auditing, you can go find somebody. And I don't do this without people's permission, unless they're, bedridden or comatose or something like that. But you can put your attention on somebody, and you can handle parts of their case at a distance, remotely, I'm not even going to say with thought. I'm just going to say with your attention, your knowingness, and intention. You can go help handle them. And I actually had this happen to the mother of my two youngest kids, and her father, she and her father had not been on speaking terms for decades, and he was dying in the hospital, and she texted me and said, "Can you help?" And I said, what do you need?" And she said, "He's dying." And I said, "Okay." So I went in session, and I went and handled a couple of things that were prominent there, that were just on the surface, that stuck out. And he came out of his coma, and communicated with both of the daughters and apologized to them, and they mended ways. And he had passed away a couple of days later, but it it brought closure and ended cycle, and brought the ARC back and everything to where it wouldn't have otherwise. And they considered it a miracle, because they never thought that would happen with their dad, because there was a lot of bad feelings there from both sides, a lot of ARC breaks. But I also bought myself a correction list in so doing.
Yeah, I bet. All the rats.
So I had to get rid of all of the rats that crossed over the line, and you have to shut that stuff down and handle it, because there is a very much a liability to what an OT puts their attention on, and what you communicate with, and you have to cut those comm lines, and for lack of a better word, shut the door.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of validity to what the OT levels can do, that is unlike most, not everything, but unlike a lot of the things that people would ever consider are possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they need to avail themselves of this, so that they can see that there's a lot more than just what the body can see and what the body can perceive. It's you that can perceive.
Yeah, there's this common thing that I've heard people talk about. Well, this guy's OT so and so, this chick's OT so and so, but he still does this and still does that. It's like, well, that it doesn't make you infallible once you become an operating thetan. It does it, once you have OT abilities, it does not make one no longer have any problems or any issues in life. We still have our responsibility to take care of having a human body. We still have things, a lot of the lower bridge is there to handle those things. It's the OT levels aren't there to make Homo sapien life necessarily better. They're not there to suddenly, like you said, heal, like Ron said, the thing about to heal your lumbosis, to heal whatever the thing is. It might just be gone, but if you're going there with that hidden standard of, well, I need to have this one thing cleared up, and that's how I'll know that I'm full OT, is when I no longer, whatever it is, and that person will bring that hidden standard in, and they'll never get there, because they're still holding everything to that hidden standard, right?
Yeah, well, the OT levels in general, they tend to make more pronounced the characteristics of the being's personality. Now that isn't to say, and I'm not talking about negative. I'm just saying, certain people are, certain figures in life. Jim Morrison, for example, from the Doors.
Yep.
Jim Morrison ran into a Santa Monica police car, and it's a true story. Ran into a Santa Monica police car drunk, and talked the policeman out of finding him, taking him to jail, arresting him, and everything, because he was Jim Morrison.
Right.
That sort of thing where you have these larger than life qualities, and you can pull things off, and you make it look easy. It turns everybody into a professional. And like Ellerate says, all beings have their own particular gifts, areas that they are imbued with, that they excel at.
You become more, right?
Yeah. You become more you, and that's the most important thing I could say about it is that you become more you,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to understand that about people is that there's nothing wrong with the person having a personality.
Right.
That the OT levels don't turn you into a blank sheet of paper. They don't turn you into a Vulcan. The OT levels do allow you to move up and down the tone scale like a concert pianist would move up and down the tone scale on a keyboard.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Berlioz Symphony Fantastique. Being able to
Yeah.
all those tones. I think that's the one piece of music that jumps out to me that goes through the entire tone scale is Berlioz Symphony Fantastique.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And that's the thing is, as you go up the OT levels, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you get the original OT levels, which is 4, 5, 6, and it's 7 if you need it, but 7 is for intention. It improves a being's intention if they need it in order to handle, say like OT3 or knots case phenomena. The original OT levels, basically LRH is going, did you know you can do this? Check this out. Did you know you can do this? Let me show you this. And these are things that, it's just the most fabulous thing you could ever see. Just the most fabulous thing, because these I'm going to call them drills more than anything, because some of them are just mind blowing, the things that you can do that actually have a result in the physical universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't impress upon anybody how much they need to do those, because it's such a validation for the state of OT. And I've heard that LRH is the one that had them removed from the grade chart, but we do deliver them here at AOGP, ao-gp.org for anybody listening, because they are so rewarding. They are positive gain OT levels. They are not negative gain OT levels where you're removing stuff.
Now, I got a picture of he removed those. Was that because of everything that was going on in that era where this material was getting stolen and being commandeered by the powers that be? And, we even, not necessarily Ingo Swann types, but the people that were taking this and turning it into weaponizing it. Is that the reason why? Do you think that that's the reason why he might have removed those?
Well, it's my understanding that they were mothballed, removed from the grade chart because of the rolling out of NED for OTs, which is a new OT 4, 5, 6, which is a course to be able to audit new OT 7. The OT 6 is not an auditing OT level for anybody that's not familiar with it. It is just a course to learn how to audit solo on NED for OTs as a solo auditor for new OT 7. And so he had those taken off the bridge for this. But the remunerative value of these OT levels cannot be stated enough.
Could you define that word that you just used?
Remunerative?
Yes, please. I don't want to be left with an MU.
Remunerative would be what you get from something. It would be like making a long trade in the stock market and you make a lot of money. You could say that trade was very remunerative.
Okay.
It's rewarding. There were proceeds to be had from it. You got a lot from it. So, I don't know why he didn't leave them on the bridge and put the new OT, the NED for OT stuff on there. I don't know why, but they can be done and they should be done because it gives you the knowledge of what you can do if you want to, though you might not have ever thought that you could. And I wish I could give you some examples. I'll give you one example. And this isn't anything confidential. Okay. There's lots of other stuff that are in the lectures and things like that are, I feel are like milestone one type thing where you're just like,
Yeah.
the milestone one lectures. So
Excellent.
one of the things on original OT6 is you have to think of somebody that you haven't had communication with for a long time, and you have to impel the intention to them to get in touch with you only via your intention alone.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Virginia, I did do that. And it was a friend of mine, a close friend of mine that I hadn't heard from for several years. And I completely forgot about it after session because I was a blowout session, just incredible with all these different steps. And I get on my laptop, and lo and behold, there he is with an email in my email inbox. And I hadn't heard from him for years. And, this is one of these things where somebody's like, well, just coincidence. And like Hubbard says, and I agree with him, there's no such thing as coincidence. It just looks that way in the physical universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because you can't see the woof and the warp outside of the physical universe. It's just coincidence.
Right. We can only see the cause and effect of it. And it's just, that's like that thing. I find it's easiest to do in a car for whatever reason. I don't know if this is anywhere in Hubbard's material, but for whatever reason, I can, and other people do this too. You can get somebody in a car next to you to look at you. I find that if, for whatever reason, it doesn't work as well when you're not sitting in a vehicle. But if you can just look kind of over at somebody in another vehicle and you get them to look at you. I try the same thing in public. Like when somebody's walking, I'll do the same kind of gesture and it won't happen. But if you're in vehicles for whatever reason, it works. Especially, I don't know.
Yeah, I call it pinging somebody. Just like they used to do with well, they still do with submarines. As they'll send out a ping as a communication.
Yeah.
So that's what you're doing is you're impelling an intention, quote unquote, particle towards the other being. And and another thing I call it is you're thunking them. You're kind of like, hey, thump, on the forehead. I'm impinging on you. Look this way, type of a thing.
And some are more sensitive than others, and they feel that thump on the head and be like, hey, what the fuck, man? Why are you looking?
Right. Yeah. Right. And people's ability to perceive that stuff varies widely.
Yeah. Little kids love it though.
Yeah. And kids are a lot more on top of it than adults are because they don't have all of the crap in the way that adults do in a lot of cases, because they're kind of new, bright and shiny type of thing.
Yeah, they just want to communicate.
Right. Yeah. And so, that's the thing is that the OT levels, it's very much about, and I know it sounds sort of, a letdown and oh, that's all, but it is, it has a lot to do about communication and a lot to do with telepathy, quote unquote, because you're doing a lot of this solo auditing telepathically.
Yeah. And
so, you're auditing on a completely different plane than one might think you are. So, there's a lot to be said for all of the potentials of the OT levels and the abilities that they give you, but it's for good. It's not for bad, and you can do a lot of positive things in your life and in the lives of others. And at the end of it, it was, for me, when I finished New OT7, was that I had a much larger liking and affinity for people and helping them. And that's why I started AOGP. So I cannot impress upon people enough that they should really run up the bridge, not walk, because the gains that can be had there, not just because they're parlor tricks or anything like that, but they're definitely gifts that you can use for the betterment of all being kind and make your life a lot saner and calmer and happier in so doing them. So any closing comments?
Yeah, again, I said those things. Those are some of the black operations use of OT abilities, and it's one of those things. It's a tool, and a tool can be used for good. A tool can be used for evil. And I think that's where, we've talked about KRC on this podcast before, knowledge, responsibility, and control. There's a certain level of responsibility that has to be taken for these abilities. And, we're doing them here at AOGP. We're taking responsibility, using these abilities for good definitely does help, helping people out. And then just being aware of the those black ops that are out there and just staying out of them, just staying away, right. Not getting involved in any way. Not, like you said, don't put any attention on any of those areas where it's coming from, because the mooring lines, the rats, go both ways on them, and you don't want putting your attention onto a target that knows that you're putting your attention onto it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you don't want to do that, because then you make yourself a target.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's the thing, is that you can handle these things to a certain degree by out creating them and creating more theta than there is end theta as a solo auditor on the OT levels. And that's the best way, I think, to look at it, is just out create it. And it's easy to do on knots and OT3 and all that. So run up that bridge. So for Jason Roba and myself, Jonathan Burke, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. And we'll see you in the next podcast. We'll be doing another one tomorrow. We're not sure on what, but we'll get it produced and get it out to you. And we hope you've enjoyed this. Talk to everybody real soon. Take care, and we love you. Bye-bye.